Welcome to Sex and the Solo Girl. Join your host, her inner circle, and expert guests weekly for chats about dating, secure attachment, the solo lifestyle, doing relationships differently, and of course, sex. And here's your host, Janice Formicella.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode, Sex and the Solo Girl, and welcome back again, Christina Morelli.
Thank you for having me, of course. Hi. Congrats on the new podcast.
Thank you so much. It's so much fun so far, and so much fun, especially because we get to do a lot of juicy topics. We did an episode several months back on breakups, broken hearts, and moving on BDSM, and I had a blast with it. And it also really put in my mind to be more assertive about starting the new show because I want to do sexy stuff all of the time.
Yes. Yes.
And here we are again covering a very sexy topic and one of, I suppose, my favorites. And that is the sub-dom dynamic, the sub-dom relationship. And you're, I guess, a little bit of an expert on the topic.
I don't know about an expert, but I definitely have experience.
Okay.
I've been in the community and lifestyle, so to say, for about 10 years and have had my share of experiences and have had the opportunity to witness other people's experiences and learn from those as well. So I love talking about this stuff. There was so much that BDSM lifestyle did for my life in a really positive way. Like, how do you communicate? Understanding what real consent is, like even something as simple as a hug, understanding the freedom that comes in being submissive and surrendering yourself. It's really a beautiful experience. And also the power and freedom that comes in for people who take on the dominant role.
I think that it has gained obvious, what am I trying to say? I think a lot of people are more aware of it these days because of 50 Shades of Grey, which we will touch on. And I guess you could say a classic submissive. And I have experience with it, not quite as much as you. And I think there's lots of curiosity around this. So yes, let's get into it. Sub-dom 101 is what I'm going to title this episode. And I think the natural place to start is, what are we talking about? Of course, it falls under the BDSM umbrella, but it's a pretty specific practice. So, Christina, what is sub-dom?
The sub-dom relationship is about power exchange, and power exchange can show up in multiple ways, which I know we're going to touch base on the different roles and styles of power exchange. But specifically, the dominant submissive is who has the power and control and who is giving up the power and control. And you often will hear it referred to as like the left side of the slash or the right side of the slash. So
if you look online, talk about that.
So some people don't identify. It's easy to identify as like dom sub just because it's like a general statement, but some people don't identify that specifically. Some people will identify as master. Some people will identify as like a rigger. Some people will identify as other things, but it's considered the left side of the slash. So if you look online, it will say like D/S.
Oh my God.
So when somebody says I'm on the left side of the slash, that means they're in like the power holder role. And if somebody says they're on the right side of the slash, they're in the power release role.
I did not know this. I have also been in these spaces for so long and never realized that. In fact, in doing research for this, I did also often notice that the S is lowercase, which stood out to me. And then also, for whatever reason, I often say sub-dom. In fact, just looking at our notes right here, I put sub-dom. For some reason, that rolls off the tongue easier or something. And so I went and did some research, and I was noticing, wow, nobody puts it as sub-dom. And I noticed it, but I didn't think much of it. That is so sexy. Oh my God.
It plays into the power of it, right? The capital of the dom, the lowercase of the submissive is. There's the aspect of like subservience in a way.
Making an
and the dom coming first, the sub coming second, just the whole power exchange dynamic that plays into it.
Love it. Okay,
Yeah.
please go on.
Yeah. So the dominant is somebody who is seeking to have control and power, but it is all consensual, right? So, and everything is negotiated, and it's negotiated with the person that is choosing to engage in that power exchange relationship. And it can look a lot of different ways. It can be something really serious and long term, and it can be something for just a temporary amount of time, which is referred to as a scene for like an hour or two. So, going back to being in control, and the thing that's really important to note is one, you really want to know who this dominant is. I personally have a practice, and this doesn't work for everybody because some people are really excited to get into it and don't want to necessarily do all the due diligence.
Okay.
But for me, it was this, at the time I started, it felt more of like a risky thing to do. I didn't know what to expect. So I had a rule of thumb where I didn't engage with a dominant or play with a dominant unless I saw them play with someone else. And that doesn't necessarily mean sexually. That means more like impact play type of play, right? So if I was going to a local BDSM dungeon and I wanted to potentially be the bottom, which is another term. The bottom is usually the person receiving the power, right? Or the person giving up the power. And then the top is the person who is taking that control and power. So the difference between, again, the top and the bottom versus the dom and a sub is top and bottom is usually just a really temporary thing. In dominant submissive can be more of a relationship established versus top and bottom is more scene oriented. And it's like, for this short amount of time, I'm going to take control and you're going to be the bottom and receive it type thing.
And I can't wait to talk about all the many possibilities. It's not just chains and collars and leashes. There's a lot that goes into this. That is an option, but that's, yes, just one. In fact, I think, well, I mean, the dominant role is actually one of extreme care. And so I'm looking forward to hearing your experience. I'm not going to use too many quotes, but I thought was very sweet. And this has become so widespread that even Mind Body Green had quite a bit of information on the dub sum. Wait, okay. See, I can't even say it. I'm so used to saying sub-dom. Yeah. Okay. Dom sub dynamic. Yeah. And I thought this was really lovely. When it comes to the dominant, they said, as a dominant, you enjoy the role of being assertive and direct how the scene plays out. You look at a DS relationship like an exchange. Power between dynamics. Says sex and relationship coach Azaria Menzes. As a dominant, I love this. As a dominant, your role is to lead, guide, protect, enforce, decide, etc. But most importantly, your role is to hold the space of trust and exercise control with responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the biggest part of it is trust and being able to, as a submissive, trust in somebody enough to know that like I can relax and know that I'll be taken care of and that this person will push my boundaries a little bit. Not push boundaries that aren't pre-negotiated, but like push the edge, I would say, in a way that is helping me grow as a person. And a part of the desire for dominance is having that trust that is just like unbreakable. Like this person is literally surrendering to me, giving me their body in a certain way, whether that's inflicting pain upon it. Like that is an incredible power to hold, and you have to hold it with a lot of care and consideration. So being a dominant is a lot of responsibility. And I think also being a submissive is a lot of responsibility as well.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. The role of the dominant, we've covered that, and I suppose it's a little more obvious than the role or the position of the submissive. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah. So being submissive is for somebody who wants to release control. It often comes from a place of feeling so in control of your life that you're seeking some outlet to let go and not have to worry about something. Somebody else is taking control of the situation. You don't have to remember all of the things and do all of the things unless that person tells you to do the specific thing. And there's just a lot of peace when it comes to being able to surrender to somebody that you trust enough and fully relax into that. There's a part of the struggle that I see with like submissive, subservient type of role is women have fought so hard. And I say specifically women because mainly women do hold that role, not all, right? But you see it's more common amongst women. And the women have fought really, really hard to get women to a place where we have the option to have a say, right? This isn't against our will. We're having now the option to say like at will, I want to be led. I want to relinquish this control to someone else is one of the most surreal experiences you can have with the right person. And one of the greatest gifts somebody can give you with the right person, right? And it's the same thing. It's the greatest gift you can give to a dominant to surrender yourself to them. That's a great gift to them, the way they give you the gift of being able to let go of things and not have to think about it or worry about it because they're in control.
And you think that's because, I mean, I think a lot of people listening would be like, oh yeah, of course men want to be in control. But it's more that you're relinquishing it and that you're giving it with, the utmost trust is what the gift is.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. It's the utmost trust. It's something that we have the ability to choose to do now, where before we didn't have a choice. So it was really oppressive for a really long time, where there's still a lot of oppression, don't get me wrong. But when you have the choice to be able to do it, it just allows people to fully be their authentic self. There are a lot of women who prefer to be in a submissive role. And I don't mean like this person's going to make all the decisions for my life and I have no say in it. You absolutely still have agency and autonomy, depending on what you negotiate, obviously. For the most part, most relationship dynamics I've seen or power exchange dynamics I've seen, the submissive still has a say, still has input, and the contracts are consistently negotiated, right? So you can negotiate it up front and then say like, this just isn't working for me and renegotiate that. So that's also a beautiful part of it is you get to change it to your comfort level as you change, as your partnership changes. And you have a lot more freedom in that. And I think that's also really important as well. When people think of like being submissive or a slave or subservient, they think of being like shackled or like not having any freedom. There's so much freedom in being able to relinquish that control that so many women or just people who want to be submissive are seeking.
And I can definitely relate. That's why I love it for sure. Whether it be, someone ordering my drink or picking where we go, or letting me completely release in the bedroom and taking over. It is this sense of complete freedom. Yeah. And what some people might not understand is that a lot of people say, I mean, if not everybody who's educated in this area, is that the sub is the one who actually has more kind of say and control rather than less. Can you speak to that just a little? I think that might be hard for some people to understand.
Yeah, the fact that the person on the right side of the slash has more say and control is because everything is negotiated. The dominant doesn't get to do anything without you giving them permission to do it ahead of time, unless you have said like you have complete and full control over the situation. And even at that point, you still have special words that you get to use where it's like, that's a hard no. I didn't realize that was a hard no, but now I realize that this is a hard no. So pineapple or red or whatever the case is. And that doesn't just exist in impact scenes or sex. It exists in just day-to-day life. If you're living a 24/7 dynamic, you can still say no. You still are, and like I said, an autonomous human being with agency, and you still have a right to say no.
And this is a relationship, especially when it's outside of the bedroom. And it can be really, really beautiful. I think that it's fairly obvious what a switch is, but can you say maybe like how common this is? Is there anything that you know about that desire? I haven't really had much experience with this.
Yeah, so switching is people who want to be able to hold both roles depending on how they're feeling. It's similar to dance. If anybody has ever done a partner dance, like tango or salsa, swing dance, anything like that, there's the lead and then there's the follow. Some people want to be able to lead and follow. It's the same concept of some people prefer one over the other, but some people like to have the flexibility of experiencing both. Now, sometimes you will hear about a dominant being a submissive as a part of like their training to be a dominant, because as a dominant, in order for you to be a really good dominant, you have to understand what your submissive is going through. What does it feel like to be spanked by a wooden paddle? What does it feel like to have somebody like walk you around on a leash? There's a lot of different aspects where it's like you need to experience that yourself in order to be able to relate to your submissive and give the best care and consideration to them.
And you did this, but in reverse.
I did.
So you knew you were submissive, you became more and more interested in it, and then so that you went to see what it's like to be a dom. What was that experience like? It kind of blows my mind, and it's made me curious to do the same thing.
Yeah, this was probably more of like a I need to feel in control situation, which is really ironic because what I want is to not be in control. But in order to be able to release control, I needed to know what it meant to have a good dominant. What does it mean to have somebody you can fully surrender to and trust, somebody who knows how to use certain toys that could cause harm. So it was really important for me to be fully educated in, you know, how to throw a whip, what are different aftercare scenarios? What does it mean to be a good dominant? How do you take care of your submissive? What does it mean to train your submissive? If you wanted to do something like high protocol, for example.
What does that mean?
High protocol is like, it's much more strict in the behaviors and engagement. So low protocol could be like, we're chilling on the couch, enjoying a movie, and like, I'm asking you to go get me a glass of water and you go get me a glass of water. Where high protocol is like, I'm going to tell you exactly what you're going to wear, when you can speak, how you engage with other people. It's a lot more rules in place to control the situation scenario. It's very common in certain scenes, like a dinner party within the BDSM community. So like, if you're at a dinner party, you're allowed to bring me a drink, but you're not allowed to make eye contact, for example. It's a very controlled scenario and situation, but it requires training, right? And training could be like different slave positions on how to present the drink, or how to sit in a certain way that your partner wants, or even training on hand signals where you and your partner can communicate across the room from each other without ever actually talking.
That is intense. Wow. Okay. This is going to be research for me. Hold on. I honestly, this is fascinating to me. I had a scene once with my dom when I was in Australia, and we went to a kink club, and it was awesome. One of the rules or agreements was that people there had to ask him to talk to me. I was so into it. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for explaining that. What was the biggest takeaway that you received from doing these classes?
Yeah, the biggest takeaway for me was understanding the behavior of a dominant that I was seeking as a submissive. There's so many different types and flavors that it helped me understand more specifically what I was seeking in a dominant, so that way I could actually ask for it and know how to negotiate. When I first met a dominant in the scene at the time, we were just talking about like what it was like. He was taking me to the local BDSM dungeon with his submissive, and we were just talking about it. And he was like, so what is on the table? What's off the table? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't know how to have any of these conversations, because I was like, I need a list. Like, I can tell you if you give me a list. But going to these classes helped me be able to actually verbalize the things that I wanted to experience and what was on the table and not off the table. So for example, I was like, well, you can do anything, because in my head, I'm like, anything within reason. But he was like, okay, so I can cut off your finger if I want to. I was like, well, no, obviously not. And he was like, that's why I need you to be really specific, because everything might not be okay. And as somebody who has no experience in this, I need you to figure out what you are okay with. So slowly do a little bit of everything, and we can talk about what feels good and what you don't want to do anymore. And I think that's also a big part of it, is having the experiences with people you trust and people in the community. Definitely the number one tip I would say is, if you are first entering into this, do not do any private at home scenes for the first time with somebody. even if you're experienced, I personally don't think you should unless you know these people really well.
Yeah.
But do not do private at home scenes with these people that you don't know, because it can be really dangerous. And if you can find a local club that supports BDSM play or has an event, then you get to witness what everybody else is doing. You're sharing the experience, the energy is there. You have people called dungeon masters around to make sure that everybody's okay. So if you're going to engage in this lifestyle, make sure that you're doing it safely and not out of a place of, oh my God, I want this so bad, which they call sub frenzy, which is like, I'm so excited about this. I just discovered this. You have like all this adrenaline running through your veins and you want to do this so bad. So then you end up making bad decisions because you want to experience it so much that you jump into it really quickly. And unfortunately, you make bad decisions versus being really thorough and doing your homework, which was a part of my experience of going to these dominant classes, was a part of my research and thoroughness.
Love it. And for anyone who's feeling turned on about this, we'll give more tips as far as really how to get started, either with your partner or without a partner. This is slightly a good segue. I just want to touch on this. 50 Shades of Grey. Yeah. There's not as much hype about it as there was for many years, a few years ago, but just quickly, because this is how it got so much into the American consciousness, especially. Yeah. What's problematic about this movie and using it as a representation of this practice or lifestyle?
Yeah, I mean, it's a dramatized story. It's a fantasy. There's not much reality of it, but what it does do is it gives the fantasy that people yearn for a lot an actual name that maybe they weren't aware of. So it brings awareness, like you said, which I think is positive. It brought awareness for me. There was like reading the 50 Shades book. I was like, oh, there's a thing for the thing that I'm seeking. And now I know what to look for and search and do more research around, where before I didn't even know that this was a thing before I read 50 Shades. So I think it does have a positive impact. Just to know that the fantasy it's selling you is not the reality of the situation. There is so much that goes into having the conversations, negotiating play terms or power exchange terms, making sure you're finding the right person to do this with.
Yeah, someone should not be identifying you and then stalking you to manipulate you into becoming their submissive.
Right. And then saying, I need you to sign this contract. And it's like, but we didn't even talk about the contract. Like there's a
whole lack of consent too in the whipping scene. That was definitely not okay. She did not know what she was getting herself into at all.
Right. And he didn't check in. Honestly, I think that's really important, is to check in, especially if you see the person, if you know the person doesn't have any experience and you see them struggling. It's really important to check in, because so many times people who enter into this world want to present a certain way to be a good submissive or to be a desirable submissive. And so they break their own boundaries. There's a level of self-betrayal that happens just to perform in a certain way. So that way, hopefully it's more pleasing to the dominant or the top.
I could see that I had maybe fallen into that a couple times when I was freshly new to it. Which I think would be somewhat natural. All right. So enjoy the film, but do not take it as a good representation of what it means to get into this and then live it.
I just want to say, yes, enjoy the film. However, if you do want to get into this, find other people who have experience in this world and talk to them, befriend them. Look almost for a mentor / coach. Yes. There's a lot of groups and they call them munches, which is like meetup groups for people in the BDSM lifestyle. So find mentors and make sure you have a strong community around you, and don't really go into this lifestyle alone, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm looking forward to maybe pushing people or pointing people in the right direction as far as how to find people. I'm also really excited to talk about different types of dom sub relationships, because it is in and outside the bedroom. It is blatantly sexual and blatantly not sexual. But first, Christina has a really cool coaching business. Can you please tell everyone how they can learn more about you and your special offer right now.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes. So my coaching is I do couples communication coaching. So if you are in partnership and you guys are having communication issues and feeling unheard, or just really struggling to make the relationship stronger and feel more connected because of the conflict that's happening, then I'm your girl. So reach out to me. My website is ChristinaMorelliCoaching.com. And the offer that I currently have is the Conflict Resolution and Repair Kit. It's over 20 plus resources that walk couples through the 3 different stages of conflict, which is pre-conflict, during, and then post, and how to repair it and strengthen that connection versus letting conflict cause a further divide. So yeah, if anybody's interested, reach out to me on my website or on Facebook at Christina Morelli Coaching.
We recently did an episode called Confrontation Confidence.
Yeah.
And we'll be doing more episodes together on just healthy communication, what it means to be in a healthy relationship. Let's get into different types of Dom. See, I have to.
Dom sub relationships.
Yeah,
I got you.
But see, every time though, I'm going to be second guessing myself to say it correctly. Dom sub relationships. Like I said, some chains and some leashes is definitely a part of it. But there's all these different ways to enjoy power/authority play and experiencing the joy of each side of the slash.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to read a list again from this really cool Mind Body Green article, which I will link to in the show notes. So, Christina, let's start with Dom sub lovers.
Yeah, that is mainly sex related. I'm actually surprised they call it lovers because I would think lovers would be more like relationship based, but it's more sex related. It's, do you want to be dominated in bed? Do you want to be dominant in bed? Controlling the way sex goes down.
Yeah, but not necessarily with all these props.
Correct. Not with all the props. It's more just like, I want to be in charge of this sex right now.
Yeah. Okay.
And it doesn't extend further than sex.
I enjoy that. Yes, for sure. Relinquishing control in the bedroom can be extremely relaxing. So let's take it a step further, perhaps master slave.
Yeah, master slave is a much more intense level of a power exchange. It's usually the most, I would say, of giving up control and taking control. So usually somebody in a master slave, at least my experience, people who are in a master slave dynamic essentially relinquish all of their control and fully trust their master to handle the situations in their best interest. Can include how you engage with your family, who you get to be friends with, what do you do to your body, how do you have your hair? Like, it could include a lot of, are you a servant around the house? Like, what responsibilities do you have? Essentially, master slave is the ultimate control, where a dominant submissive, you can negotiate certain aspects of your life that person can have control over. You can say, for example, like, you can have control over sex and over my social life, but you're not allowed to interact or have any say at all in how I engage with my family or my finances, right?
Okay,
so
interesting.
It's looking at different parts of your life and understanding what control you're willing to give up. And usually master slave is, there's a lot more control being given up.
And also as far as the serving role goes, you gave an example in the BDSM episode that we did as far as making sure that your dominant has a drink prepared for him when he comes home. It could be any number of things. How widespread is this? I don't know that I've really encountered it a lot.
I don't know how to answer that because it is usually a very private experience and confidential. Like, for example, even just my dominant submissive relationship that I've had, we would do certain things in public or around people, but it was very subtle that nobody would know that it was a power exchange experience. Nobody would know unless, you stated otherwise. So I'm not quite sure how popular it is. Dominant submissive is way more popular than master slave. Master slave is like marriage for life and beyond. It's very hard to find that right person to have that dynamic with because of everything that goes into it. But I think what you were talking about with the drink, just having rituals in general, whether you're in a power exchange dynamic or not, it's all about the rituals and prioritizing your relationship and reminding each other how beautiful what we have. And that's the whole point of the rituals within a lot of power exchange relationships.
It's beautiful. And I mean, if anyone wants to come on and anonymously talk to me about your master slave dynamic, please, I just find it, extremely fascinating. I'd love to speak to someone who's loving it. And so let's talk about just classic bondage, dom sub style.
Yeah, bondage is essentially wanting to be restrained, right? So the dominant would be the one doing the restraining. The submissive would be the one receiving the restraint. It could be rope. I've seen people talk about mummification, which you wrap your partner up in cellophane.
I was so intrigued by this when we talked about it on the BDSM episode.
Yeah. I mean, it could be handcuffs. It could be even, I know like usually a collar and leash is associated with like puppy play or something like that, but that is even considered bondage because no matter where your dominant moves, you're moving with them. You're going with them.
Being held down. I really like that experience for sure. And this is where shibari comes into play, which I'm trying to prep an episode just on shibari. Can you tell people what shibari is?
Shibari is a Japanese style of rope tying that is specific to, it's very kink oriented. So if you look up like shibari in photos, it's really beautiful. A lot of the artwork it's a great artistic expression, but it also is something that can help somebody just completely lose themselves in a really good euphoric way when you're like being tied up and can't necessarily move. You don't really have a choice but to let go. And sometimes people need that additional enforcement in order to let go. Choosing to let go is hard for us, but being forced to let go, which is often a negotiated part of DS dynamics, being forced to let go is another aspect which often is included in bondage.
I had a training relationship, which we're just about to talk about, and he was a shibari master. And so at the same kink club that I mentioned earlier, where we had the agreement that people had to ask him to talk to me, we did shibari, and I was actually suspended, which some people consider to be kind of like the ultimate shibari practice, I suppose. It was rigging. So cool. It was a wonderful experience, and a really, really interesting sensation to not only not be able to move at all, but then to be actually suspended in air, not being able to move. I mean,
talk about vulnerability.
It was, yes, and and with people watching as well. It's something that I'm kind of seeking out currently.
The other thing about shibari is part of the practice is fully focusing on areas that would be considered like humiliating in a way. So tying somebody up in a way that like exposes their armpit, for example, like in the Japanese culture, like that is a part that is really private or could be humiliating to be exposed, right? It's really about exposure sometimes. So you can do shibari in a lot of different ways. You can do it from a place of, I just want to tie this person up and have this experience. You could do it from a place of, I want to experience humiliation. So we're going to tie you up in a certain way that exposes all the parts of you that you really aren't supposed to be exposing. It could also be a really sensual activity, depending on if you wrap the rope around and then let it like pull it all over their skin. And then you feel that sensation of the rope coming over your skin. There's a lot of different ways you can play with shibari.
Yes. And like I said, I'm going to be doing some more content around this. So keep your eyes on this space. So what about a training relationship? I had this experience when I was in Melbourne. I worked with someone or was in a relationship with someone for a number of months. And this was the goal. We had some wonderful experiences together and did get to know each other quite well. But the entire time it really was with the agreement that he had a desire to train someone. I hadn't any experience with this whatsoever. And I was kind of in a period of my life of, I don't know, it was an expansive period. I had just left a really abusive relationship. Yeah. And so when he presented it to me, I just thought, why not? And so, yes, over the next several months, there was different things that he trained me on. But why don't you let us know what is this? How would you get into it? Why, etc.
Yeah. I mean, training again goes back to, I don't need to think about how I need to act or be concerned about what can I figure out what pleases you? You're going to tell me exactly what pleases you, and I'm going to do it that way. So training can look like a bunch of different things. And again, this is a very short stint of time. Usually this isn't like for an extended period of time.
Yeah,
this is what I would consider scenes. There's also the training going back to high protocol of like, how do I present my drinks to you? How do I light a cigar and do, a cigar service? How do you prefer me to fold your laundry? How do you it's really all about, I want to please my dominant. So he's going to tell me and train me on how to do things the way he wants it done. And I'm going to do it that way.
Mine was sexual training. So I find the puppy thing interesting for sure.
It's not something I can relate to. I've never been into puppy play or pony play or anything like that, but it's very...
I do know that it's definitely a thing. I did know some people when I was in Melbourne who were actually really into the pony play. But my experience was, yes, this sexual training, which was really cool, really expansive, fascinating for sure. I definitely enjoyed, serving him and learning what he liked. And I remember we did, I believe, oral sex training. And I remember him saying, you are going to use this and benefit from it for, the rest of your life, which I think he kind of got off on. And he was absolutely right.
That's awesome.
No, really. It was a really, really cool experience.
Nice.
So let's talk about key holders.
Yeah. Key holders is around chastity and essentially having access to your genitals.
Okay.
So for men who are in the submissive role, that could look like a cock cage, where it would be really uncomfortable if you got hard while you were wearing a cock cage. And the only way you get to access your cock is if we take the cage off, or the same thing with a chastity belt for, people who have yonis and vulvas. So it's really about being able to access your genitals in that way, and the person who has the key to the cock cage or the chastity belt.
So key holders, interesting. And I have actually played with one of these cock cages. And from what I could tell, yes, extremely uncomfortable under certain circumstances. So what about the caregiver / little dynamic?
Yeah, has a lot to do with daddy, mommy, child dynamics, which can be really healthy for people who have experienced childhood trauma, and then they get to be in control of how they want to replay a scenario or a situation. Some people just feel really good regressing back to a certain age and enjoying playing in this regressive state, and having a daddy taking care of them or having a mommy taking care of them. There's a lot in the community littles playtime. And that could look like coloring books or crafts or, holding teddies and cuddling and having juice boxes. So it's how you envision treating a child. That's kind of the caregiver little role of that dynamic.
There's a whole community of this out there. Like I said, I was kind of tangentially involved with it when I was in Australia. And people finding a lot of joy out of this.
Yeah,
dynamic.
It can be a really healing experience when you have these corrective experiences that you can go to as an adult. But at the same time, I just don't think it's something I can personally relate to. But I know it's really healing for a lot of people to have these corrective experiences if they didn't have a really great childhood.
Right. And yes, I guess the obvious place to go and look into any of this would be on Reddit.
Yeah.
And there are thriving little communities on Reddit.
There sure are.
I think that's a good place. If you're trying to get a taste for what this is, find the right board. But if you do, you can really get quite educated.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about kind of this permanent situation with this dynamic. Is there anything that's different about the 24/7 Dom sub agreement?
Yeah, the thing about 24/7 is you're engaging in this power exchange, not to the fantasy level where everything's super sexy all the time or I'm always going to be subservient, but it's more of that you're heeding when you decide that the person's going to be in control, you're going to heed their guidance for just your day to day, right? So in the moments where, let's say your dominant comes to you and is like, where do you want to eat? And you're like, I want to eat, I don't know, at Applebee's. And he's like, well, actually, I want to go to Chili's. And you ultimately go to Chili's. You don't fight back. It's in the 24/7 is all day, every day. You have an agreed terms. And it doesn't just exist in the bedroom. It doesn't just exist in negotiated, timed scenes that you have. It's all of the time. And it's usually when you are in a partnership with somebody that you have a dynamic with.
Beautiful. And again, this is about trust and consent.
Yes.
Let's make sure to keep coming back to that. We're going to talk about just how to get into this. We both have some ideas, guidance for you, but first we're going to take a really quick commercial break and then get into some more juicy stuff. I am passionate about the opportunity that a breakup gives us for a fresh start, but it can sure be hard to see that when you're heartbroken, right? I have worked with people all around the world to beat their breakups with my own 3-part process. I've created an ebook that guides readers through each step using practical advice straight from an experienced breakup coach. Click on the link at the top of the show notes and get your copy of the Broken Heart Repair Kit, the 3-step method for beating your breakup, at my special Sex and the Solo Girl release price of just $24.99. And remember, you've got this. Welcome back, everyone. So if this sounds interesting to you, if you feel turned on, what do you do with this? I know I have a lot of listeners who are single, some who aren't. We're going to give tips for both partnered and unpartnered individuals. So I guess as far as a very, very, very first step is do your research. That goes back to what I was just barely saying about Reddit. Go online, look at things, read things, see what other people are doing, and just research before you go on FetLife, which we're going to talk about, before you really go out and aggressively try to meet people and seek this out. Know what you're actually seeking out. Know exactly what part of this you want to do. And like I said, I thought that Reddit was really, really, really great. I got quite into this when I was in Melbourne, not just with the Dom who was training me, but then in my subsequent relationships. And I thought Reddit was wonderful. I got really into Shibari. I got really into the language of how to speak with your partner. And once I found the right Reddit board, I was able to sink deeper into it. There's lots of great imagery that people share, experiences, etc. What do you think as far as the starting point for research goes?
Yeah, definitely researching. There's a couple websites that I would recommend. I spent years researching before I finally started engaging socially.
Oh, really? Years?
Years. Years.
Why? Like, can you say more about that?
I was just really nervous because I didn't understand what it was, I was like, I knew I had a desire, but I didn't know what to expect. And there was a lot of misconceptions that it's a very predatory area or community, and that's not true at all. In fact, I feel safer in the BDSM community than I do out in the vanilla world. So, but because of the ignorance that I had at the time, not understanding what was actually went down, I just did a bunch of research. So when I knew I was going to go out there and start socializing, that I could have some information as to like, how do I feel safe in this? And, what makes me feel comfortable? How do I engage in ways that feel safe for me? One of the websites that I really enjoy is submissiveguide.com.
Okay.
There is a ton of information on here. This was one of my favorites when I first started.
I'm going to put everything in the show notes, everyone. Submissiveguide.com.
So yeah, research. And then at that point, start to socialize in different ways, but in community. Because again, doing this alone can be dangerous. There are people out there who claim that they're dominant and claim that they're experienced, but they're just trying to assert their control and power over you in a way that isn't okay, in my opinion. It's really important that having support around you and community around you can be really helpful in guiding you as to like, who is a trustworthy dominant in this scene? Who is somebody I could learn Shibari from, or learn about rope from, or whips from, or something like that. So at that point, I would then suggest getting on FetLife, and FetLife is full of a bunch of like a bunch of stuff that that it can be overwhelming. It's not the easiest, most user-friendly website, but if you're looking for something specific, you can search like local munches, for example.
Well, and let's just stop for a second. As far as the research goes, that is awesome. I think that that can lead you in the right direction as far as what is really, really resonant with you. But also, I would say before you go on FetLife, yeah, so first research. And then I mention this all the time on the show, but I really love the BDSM quiz online. I'm going to link to it.
Yeah.
And it's over 100 questions. And I think that by answering these questions, you can start to get a sense of maybe what really turns you on, what you might be into, especially if you're this appeals to you, but you're not really sure what direction to go.
Yeah.
And so I would definitely say take this quiz, again, linked in the show notes, and maybe then go on FetLife, because you're right. That website is like, woo, where do I start? What is all this?
You should do a tutorial on how to navigate FetLife. It's really overwhelming. And it looks like a porn site, honestly, guys.
Yeah,
like it looks like you're entered into a porn site, but there is communities, there's events that people list. It's like the Facebook version it's the social media version of the kink world. And also, if you just search in your local area, depending on, usually it's only in popular cities, is kink events or BDSM dungeons or parties, events, things like that.
If you don't mind, we haven't talked enough about dungeons.
Yeah.
I don't think I've been to one. Can you kind of in a nutshell, I mean, I think it might be obvious what it is, but just say
it's
a
not
little
an
bit
actual
about
dungeon. They usually don't even look like dungeons. They're just referred to as dungeons. It's usually a warehouse that is set up for people to go in the kink community and have scenes in a public space. They provide benches and certain furniture that you can do scenes on. I've been to some really elaborate places where they have different rooms for different things, depending on your fancy. And then I've been to some where it's like just an open space and they have a couple of spanking benches and some rigging options where if people wanted to do rope rigging, then you can use this certain pole for that. But it's essentially a place for people to go and publicly do kinky stuff. And usually dungeons, the rule is no sex. So it's not a sexual place at all. I mean, it's obviously sexual, but there's no sex ever, usually at any dungeons I've ever been to. So the whole point of it is like, I want to experience a impact scene. So we go and, you get to experience that. But there's, for the safety and consent of people, there's usually no sex or orgasms.
Wow. Okay. Maybe that could be an entire other episode. Fascinating. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. If you are in a partnership and the two of you want to dive into this, I think a lot of the same things apply, doing research, etc. But how can you explore this as a couple? How do you really get into this? I think actually there might even be more to research and consider in a way if you're inside of a partnership and want to add
there might be more limitations in that sense. Because if you're single, you can be like, I want to try all the things. And I have options to try the things. Like I know a group of people who do this and I know a person who does that, and you can try all those things. But if you're in a monogamous relationship, it's limited to just what you and your partner are willing to do with each other. Then you have to really clearly understand what you and your partner are willing to do, which comes back down to negotiations of just, how does it feel if I kneel in front of your feet? How does it feel if I ask you to tell me what to wear every day? How does it, like, just gauging what feels good for them? And most people will be like, I'm willing to try it. As long as it's safe, I'm willing to try it and see, because sometimes fantasy is better as a fantasy and not as a reality. And I think sometimes what people realize is how much responsibility goes into being in a DS dynamic if you're doing it like full time versus just spurts of it, like negotiated scenes. So ultimately it depends on what you and your partner are willing to do. The best thing to do is to express to them what you're wanting. I want to feel less in control. I want to be able to feel like I can let go. That looks like you making the decisions for the rest of the night. And I don't have to think about a goddamn thing. I can just relax. And sometimes serving somebody is relaxing. I just don't want to have to think about it. I don't want to have to make decisions. And so it's really just seeing what your partner is comfortable doing and what they're willing to try and what they're not willing to try.
And it takes a lot of conversations. That would
Yeah.
probably be one of the main differences inside of a partnership versus outside. Is there's going to be a lot of discussions about this, because not only do you have to kind of determine what each of you want to explore, but then it's, what does that mean? And deciding some of these things before you're having, a sexual scene. And
it also feels risky, I think, for couples to talk about it, because it's like, I'm expressing a desire. What if my partner doesn't want to do this thing?
Yeah.
And now, does that mean that I'm not going to be ever satisfied in this relationship? So it's a really risky thing to bring certain things up that maybe you don't think your partner would be open to. And if your partner seems closed off, just like providing some expansiveness to their thought process. Like, it doesn't have to be the black and white, this is what relationships look like. Your relationship can be whatever you want it to be. It can be a mild version of it. It could be an extreme version of it. And anywhere in between, it's a scale.
Beautiful. And I will say also, as a starting point, again, this BDSM test, because you can both take it and then come together and talk about it. And this will lead to lots of discussions.
Yeah.
It will also lead to seeing where the crossover is between both of your desires. And you can go from there. And again, I'm not like the biggest Reddit fan in the world, but I do, suggest that if you're inside of a partnership, there's lots of discussions about couples and how they do this.
Speaking of the BDSM test, something that I did and I would encourage couples to do is you reading the questions to your partner, and your partner has to answer them.
Ooh, hot. Ooh,
yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. I'm liking that. Before we wrap up, I know I might be putting you on the spot a bit. What is the most important or beautiful or meaningful thing that you have gained from kind of leaning into this practice/lifestyle?
Yeah. So something I didn't realize until after I entered into the lifestyle is the thing that drew me to the lifestyle is my incredibly deep desire and yearning for being in the feminine and masculine dynamic, around the masculine and feminine energy, right? When I think of a masculine energy, it's everything that you described for dominant. It's a leader, it's a caregiver, it's I need to be able to trust you. It's all of those things. And the thing that helps me really fall into my feminine energy in essence is being able to relax and not have to be stressed, and I can just let go. And so they say, like, the ultimate version of somebody being in their feminine is being able to fully surrender to the masculine that you fully trust and is present, is in their full presence. And that is literally what I feel like the epitome of power exchange dynamics are. And it was the realization that that's actually what I was seeking, is just a really strong masculine feminine energy dynamic. It wasn't necessarily the whips and the change, which are all really hot, don't get me wrong, but ultimately I knew I wanted to be in a relationship where I had a partner who was a strong leader, who was able to help me facilitate being in my feminine as much as possible. I just want to say one more thing in regards to like seeking it out. There's also a lot of kink-based conventions that happen. There's one in Atlanta that happens every year. Frolicon is a common one. Frolicon, like Frolic Con. Yeah, it's a really popular one. I've been to several. I didn't go to Frolicon yet, but I've been to several other conventions.
What are they like? I, for some reason, hadn't considered talking about this. What is a kink-based convention?
Yeah, kink convention it's usually a week-long event that happens at a hotel somewhere, and a bunch of people show up and get to live in their kink world for the weekend and really enjoy it. So there's classes during the day. There's vendors that sell certain types of kink toys or clothing. The classes could include anything from like how do you flog 101 to flogging as an expert, or how to do knife play. What does it mean to be a submissive, how like slave poses. There's a lot of different classes you can take depending on your fancy. And then at nighttime, they open up the play space, and it's usually a big party that's associated with it. And people will go and do play scenes together at night and just engage with other people in the community. It's just a safe space for people who are kinky and often on the edges of society, like have a safe place to go to fully express themselves and be accepted and get to live fully in this world.
And probably explore more what you might want to lean into, either as an individual or as a couple.
Especially
cool.
if there's not a lot of options around you. So if you live in a small area and there's not a lot of like kink resources near you, you can go to conventions and have it all.
Mm-hmm. Christina, thank you for being here with us. I love how we're talking about communication a lot of the time. And then we, go all the way over to kink and BDSM. You have such a wealth of knowledge and expertise.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the communication skills that I learned was because of the BDSM community.
Yeah.
So it played a huge role in my life's work around communication. So I appreciate you having me on as always. And you're such a dear friend. And I am just so excited for your new podcast. And if you haven't yet, make sure you leave star reviews for her podcast on whatever platform you're using and get your friends to listen as well.
Wow, that is very, very sweet of you. I love having you as a guest and a co-host. This was such a blast. I'm really revved up. I hope that those listening are as well. If there's a topic you want Christina and I to cover in the future, clearly we're not shy. So
we'll talk about it.
Yeah, let me know. Okay. All right, Christina, thank you so much. And yeah, I'll see everyone next week. Go and get kinky in the meantime.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Sex and the Solo Girl with Janice Formicella, the podcast for those who want to add more flavor to their relationships with themselves and others. If you liked today's episode, make sure to head over to Instagram and let her know. See you next week.